I'm going to make a prediction, and it's one I do not like making in the slightest bit. It brings me no joy to say it, but I believe it's the truth. The United States will never have a woman as president of the country, at least in my lifetime. So I'd say the earliest I could see it would maybe be the 2080s or 2090s or even, 100 years from now. But the reason I feel that way is more so based off of patterns and just things with uh, little interesting semantics I've noticed. So just to start this off, we have had women running for office for a very long time, but in the last 10 years, there's been a record number of them running, for the House, for the Senate. And we've now had two of them who've been nominated for president by the Democratic Party, right? Hillary in 2016 and then Kamala in, this previous year. And both of them lost. But what I thought was interesting is that when Hillary lost in 2016, like I've said it repeatedly, I can't stand the lady. I call her Hellspawn Hillary. I think she is one of the most damaging political figures, I'd say, of the last 40 or 50 years. And at the same time as I said that, I also believed that if she had played her cards differently, right, visited swing states, taken more left-wing positions, and not in effect continue the abandonment a lot of people felt from Obama's 8 years, that she might have had a chance of winning. I've always maintained that these last 20 years worth of presidential elections could have swung one way or the other. So when that happened, that was the rationale I gave, that she's unlikable, that she has been a figure who's been contentious for, over 30 years at that point. But then when you go over to Harris, who had nowhere near as long of a national profile, obviously she had been a contentious VP, but what does the vice president really get to do? When she was defeated by 2024 Trump, not the 2016 one that people didn't know what he was going to do, and he could sometimes sound like he was left wing on this and right wing on that, where it was like a really just kind of like rolling the dice. You'll know exactly what you're going to get. When she ran against the Trump who had already been president, who had already lost to another man, who now had 90 plus criminal charges in 4 states. I mean, when she was defeated by him, my ability to dismiss gender as a factor became much more difficult to do. And really, that's kind of why I brought up the larger number of women that are running for office, because like I was talking with someone a few months ago, and they basically said to me that it is inevitable the United States will have a woman as president. But I was, again, like, just thinking about these past election cycles. Like, look at 2020. You had, Gillibrand, Warren, Harris, Gabbard, Williamson, all these very large number of women, more than just a few, several, vying for the Democratic nomination. I actually forgot about Klobuchar. And even in there being so many of them running that year, none of them made it through the primary. Of course, you can say that it's difficult to stand out in a field of 20 people, or we can again get into the semantics. But what I'm saying is, when you would look at such a large number of them, you think, oh man, this is going to happen. Look at how many of them are running for it. But then you start to see how, in spite of there being so many, the results remain the same, right? The Democrats nominated a man. Personally, if I thought if they were going to nominate any man that year, they should have nominated Sanders. But I'm not going to relitigate that. We already talked about the DNC and their BS. So I guess what I'm conveying here is that it is conceivable to me that over the next several presidential election cycles, right, 2024, 2028, 32, yada yada yada, you could see I don't know why I said 24, 28, 32, 36, whatever. You're going to see probably on average multiple women running for president and I don't like leaving out Jill Stein and the rest of them, but for the two major parties nominations, you're going to see more and more women running for them, but the results are going to stay the same, where they get maybe a few delegates, maybe they're like Nikki Haley, they win a state, but it's always going to be this thing where, in spite of their appearing like, oh man, there's actually a pretty high chance of the Democrats or Republicans nominating the woman. I think it's just going to again be more for show, like something that people like believing, is possible when there's really no chance for them. And man, what's so interesting about female voters is that they kind of remind me of, I guess, the Hispanic vote, where you have the Republicans who just always are, doing the whole anti-immigration thing, and you would believe that would make it easy for the Democrats to get a big chunk of the Latino vote, but then you remember that right, that Obama deported, I believe it was over 2 million illegal immigrants, and just basically the Republicans get such a large amount of that vote because the Democrats are not able to appeal to a community that they could very easily slide into their favor. With women voters, it's pretty similar in the sense that Democrats tend to get a majority of the female vote, but it's not nothing, it's not like 80-90%, the way they are with black voters, for example, where we basically just automatically support the Democrat no matter what. And I have criticized that aspect as well. But I'm just saying, you're gonna keep seeing this pattern continue. And I've actually also said that thanks to, and it's not fair, I admit that, thanks to Hillary and Kamala losing, I'm much more comfortable believing that the Republicans are more likely to nominate a woman for the first time than the Democrats would be to nominate a woman for the third time. Because they're going to take from their losses that, a woman candidate means that there's a higher chance she'll lose, because they'll look at those two. And it's not fair, because if you actually look at the circumstances, I'm not one of these people that brought up that Harris didn't, win the primary, that it was just anointed, whatever, but they've really only actually nominated a woman for president one time, right? Because with Harris, it was just, she was on the ticket with Biden, he dropped out, so she took over. But I'm saying that's probably still going to be something that's going to play into how they react for the next couple of election cycles, where they convince themselves, okay, well, gender must have been a big part of this for this very qualified politician to lose to this, person that had criminal charges, because they're a male, so they have male privilege, and that's why they were, able to win the election. And it's sad, because I don't, I've said this before, Republicans, I don't think they're going to nominate a black person in my lifetime. The Tim Scotts and Larry Elders of the world. I don't think they're going to nominate a woman in my lifetime. You had Haley sit there and get, I think it was 4 million votes and win only one state. It's not something that and again, sometimes it's the racial or gender stuff, but in other times it's like, they're always going to have that male that they like more. Like, maybe a lot of Trump people, Republican voters, whatever, do like, dog killer Kristi Noem and her, anti-immigration crusade, but in 2028 or even, 32, they're probably going to trend more towards, Vance or, Tucker Carlson or one of these other people, right, than her, where it's like, by virtue of there being always, to them, a more attractive male candidate, they'll flock to them naturally over the woman, which, again, goes back to my point of how you can have women run for president every year, 5, 10, 15, 20, but it seems like every election cycle there's always going to be some man that the voters, male and female, by the way, just tend to gravitate towards more. which is I think it's sad because I don't think, like I said before, there's really no male politician who hasn't run for president already that I would, I guess, just naturally flock to, other than maybe Ro Khanna. So like if you had Ilhan Omar or Tlaib, or I'm not going to say AOC because she's been getting on my damn nerves, but just as an example, those are various women that if they ran for president, I probably would support them over any of their opponents that would realistically challenge them. So like not, this is like excluding somebody like Bernie, for example, who's not going to run again. And I do believe that while it's very unlikely we'll see the Democrats or Republicans nominate a woman, again, in my lifetime anyway, and I'm not talking 50, 60, 70 years from now, I think there's a much stronger likelihood that you'll have some man as president and then he'll either pass away or get sick and resign, and then the woman will get it. It'll be kind of like an LBJ situation where they take office because of their predecessor being incapacitated, and then that's how you get your first woman president. I think that's a lot more likely than, because the U.S. has already elected a ticket with a female as VP. It took 3 attempts, right, with Ferraro in '84 and then Palin in 2008, but they proved that they don't care about there being, at least a majority of them, a woman as the vice president. So that is the only path I could see one of them getting it in the next couple of decades. And like I said, I don't say this with any happiness because, we talk about like all the romance stuff and the triangle, whatever, but like I have never believed that, female politicians just in general are any worse than male ones, right? If they're taking the same, corporate money and bootlicking for foreign governments like Israel and Saudi Arabia, they're just as bad. But I'm saying that the U.S. would see, in my view, no worse state of affairs than, with the woman as the president than if it's a man. So it's not, for me, it's not really that big of a deal if there's one or not, or whether that it's not something I'm against. It's just kind of sad to see like more and more of them. Like in this, it is the appearance of inclusion, but then the delusion that it's actually going to get to that natural endpoint. Like what's really sad is that so many of them are going to just keep running and running and running, and when it goes nowhere, we'll try to say there were other factors, and there are oftentimes other factors, right? But again, if it happens over and over, I just have to say I don't think it's going to break itself. Like for cycles to break themselves, it requires people to acknowledge what caused those things to happen before. Like just as an example, within if you go and like look at African American presidential candidates, you really only, like prior to Obama, the only like serious one you had in terms of winning a party's nomination was Jesse Jackson. So the supposed struggle for a black president wasn't really that pronounced because blacks had only been shown to have a competitive streak in a primary for a little bit over 20 years. Starting in '84 and '88 when Jackson ran and got millions of votes, and then Obama came around 2 decades later. But I'm just saying that like with women running for president, you're already seeing you go back to like 2008 where Hillary came very close to getting a nomination and eventually did end up getting it 8 years later. You're seeing that it's stretching into a much longer time span that's making me believe that like, yeah, this is, if it does happen, it's not going to be anytime soon. I mean, that's interesting how a group can just have so much representation, right? Like in terms of its members vying for that highest office, but then in spite of there being so many of them, they actually have no chance of winning. And again, some of them not charismatic, some of them unlikable, some of them not courageous in the sense that they take positions that a lot of people don't like because they're trying to appease their donors. But I would be lying if I said that there is not a sizable portion of the electorate, maybe a solid 20-30%, composed, mostly of some guys, but also there's, some women as well, who are just not going to vote for a woman as president. And you have always, since the history of elections, had people who discriminated on the basis of something that they believe, even if it's not true, would negatively impact that person's ability to hold, the highest office in the land. You have people who didn't like Al Smith and Kennedy for being Catholic. You had people who don't like, Obama for being black. I mean, it's just, we can go down the list of just different stuff that they can convince themselves is disqualifying. And the only thing that shows that most of us don't care to have that be the thing that dissuades us is if we get a majority to vote for that person. So it's not a prediction I like making, but I think over the next 20, 30, 40 years, you're going to see more and more women running for office, which is a good thing, but they will never be able to win a presidential primary for either party and then also win the presidential election. Their best bet is to be the VP for a male presidential candidate, and then if after a few years that man gets sick, passes away, etc., then they take over that way. I really think that's the only way you're going to get a woman president anytime soon. And I hope I'm wrong. There are a few things that I make predictions of that I like being incorrect about, but this is certainly one of them. Because like I said, when I think of candidates, right, I think of the issues. For me, the perfect candidate, and I say perfect, I'm leaving some subjectivity here in terms of just stuff that I can be, flexible about. Someone that wants to raise wages, someone that wants healthcare for more people, usually with single payer, but, there are other methods as well. Someone that supports, free college, the Green New Deal, of course, taxing the rich. And as long as someone espouses those views, I don't care what their gender, their race, their religion, none of that is a factor to me. As long as they have the positions that I like, I'll support them. So it's not hard for me to have favor with various candidates. It's just kind of sad that I know that those unimportant things are going to be a factor, because the truth is people are just not as inclusive as I am. And I don't say that to pat myself on the back. It's just I'm not in the business of judging people for stuff they can't control, because Lord knows I have been judged for those things more times than I could count just by being on this site. So yeah, that's just my prediction. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I will be.